He thought he'd never see her again, until on that flight he found his ex holding 3 babies who had his eyes, and in that instant, the past he tried to forget came roaring back with devastating force. If you enjoy stories like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel. We post new content every day. Now back to the story. American Airlines Flight 3504 from New York to Miami was running 40 minutes late, and Ryan Montgomery had already checked his Rolex 3 times in the last 5 minutes. The most feared businessman in the country adjusted the knot of his Italian tie with a precise movement, his long, firm fingers gliding over the navy blue silk like someone tuning an instrument of war. At 38, Ryan had built a real estate empire that stretched across the country, but his true fortress was the absolute control he maintained over his own emotions. Seated in first class, he reviewed the contract documents one last time, the ones that would change everything. The development in Miami, a complex of residential towers in South Beach, represented not just millions in profit, but the definitive consolidation of Montgomery Holdings as the largest developer in the United States. Ryan didn't believe in chance. Every move was calculated, every decision strategic, every feeling a controlled variable. 2 years ago, he had done something unusual for his rigid standards. He proposed a contract marriage to his executive assistant. Not for love, that word didn't even exist in Ryan's corporate vocabulary, but to repair his public image after the business press began questioning his non-existent personal life. Maria Rodriguez, an NYU Stern graduate and the daughter of a housekeeper from the Bronx, accepted the proposal out of sheer financial necessity. Her mother needed expensive surgery, and her assistant's salary, though generous, wouldn't cover the medical bills. During their 2 years living together in the West Village penthouse, they shared a routine that ran like a Swiss watch. Ryan would leave at 6 a.m. for his private gym, return for a breakfast prepared by Maria, discuss the day's agenda with the precision of a corporate meeting, and in the evening when he arrived from the office, she would have already organized his mail, laid out his suits for the following week, and prepared reports on the social events they were to attend together. It was a life silently charged with tension. Maria had fallen in love. How could she not fall for a man who walked through the house as if he owned the world, who spoke 3 languages fluently, who played classical piano during sleepless nights? But Ryan never allowed vulnerability to take root between them. Not even on the nights she appeared in the living room wearing only his t-shirt, not even when they woke up in each other's arms after one of the rare times they shared a bed on business trips. He had fallen in love too, madly. Maria had a laugh that could rearrange all the furniture. In his organized soul, a sharp intelligence that surprised him in business discussions, and an inner strength he recognized because it mirrored his own. When she talked about her childhood dreams in the Bronx, when she cried in his arms the night her mother had surgery, when they danced closely at his partner's wedding, and for 5 minutes Ryan forgot it was all just a contract. In all those moments, he felt something he preferred to call professional admiration. But he never admitted it, not even to himself. To admit it would be to lose control, and Ryan Montgomery didn't lose control of anything. When the 2-year term neared its end, Maria did something he hadn't anticipated. She asked for a divorce and disappeared without explanation. She left only a formal letter stating that she would not be renewing the contract, that her mother was well, that the experience had been enriching, and that she was moving on with her life. Ryan found the letter on the kitchen table, next to the apartment keys, the company credit card, and the $80,000 wedding ring. For 6 months he searched for her discreetly. He hired private investigators, scoured social media, and called every mutual contact. Maria Rodriguez had simply vanished from New York City. The investigators discovered she had withdrawn all the money from her bank account, sold the small condo she'd bought for her mother in Yonkers, and disappeared without a trace. Her mother, Mrs. Carmen, had moved to a small town somewhere in Florida that no one could pinpoint. Ryan convinced himself it was just wounded pride. He threw himself into work with renewed intensity, expanded his business to the southeast, acquired 2 competing development firms, and made a point of appearing in the society pages with a different socialite at every event. Feelings, he had decided, were a distraction far too expensive for a businessman. That's why, on that rainy June Thursday, flying to Miami to close the most important deal of his career, Ryan Montgomery was absolutely certain he had overcome any lingering sentimental residue from his past. The flight attendant announced that boarding would be completed shortly, and Ryan placed the documents back in his Italian leather briefcase. He leaned back in his seat, closed his eyes for a few seconds, and took a deep breath. In 3 hours he'd be in Miami, and by the end of the week, he'd own another piece of the American coastline. That's when he heard it. A woman's voice, low and melodic, talking to a crew member about a seat and a carry-on bag. A voice he would recognize even after a decade of absence. A voice that made him snap his eyes open and turn his head toward the center aisle of the plane. Maria Rodriguez was just a few feet away, carrying a pink diaper bag and trying to manage what looked like a military-grade logistical operation. She was thinner. Her brown hair was longer, her skin tanned like someone who lived under the Florida sun. She wore a simple white blouse, faded jeans, and had dark circles under her eyes that betrayed sleepless nights. But she was still the most beautiful woman Ryan had ever seen. His heart, too disciplined to react to anything for the past 2 years, stumbled inside his chest like a clumsy teenager, and then Maria turned slightly to the right, and Ryan saw a baby. In her arms, a boy of about 1.5 years, with golden curls and rosy cheeks, dressed in a navy blue onesie. A few seconds later, flight attendant helped Maria settle 2 other babies into special child seats. 3 children, triplets. The air vanished from Ryan's lungs, completely, as if someone had opened the cabin door mid-flight. Maria hadn't seen him yet. She was focused on adjusting the children's seatbelts, murmuring sweet words and handing out pacifiers and small toys. The 3 babies were identical, curly blonde hair, fair skin, delicate features. But when the boy in her arms turned to look at the other passengers, Ryan felt the world crack in silence. That face, those eyes, the exact color, the shape, the serious, observant expression. Ryan was looking at a miniature version of himself. His hands began to tremble. Imperceptibly, but they trembled. Ryan Montgomery, the man who never hesitated in any negotiation, who faced down the heirs of old money dynasties without flinching, who broke competitors for breakfast, was trembling because 3 babies had just redefined his understanding of reality. He did a quick mental calculation. 1.5 years. The child was about 18 months old, which meant he was conceived exactly at the end of their contract marriage, in the final weeks before Maria disappeared. Ryan remembered the nights he'd come home to, find her acting strangely, quieter, avoiding eye contact. He remembered the morning she left early, claiming she had a doctor's appointment. He remembered with painful clarity the last time they made love, a stormy night when they both temporarily broke the unwritten rules of their contract and gave in to a passion they had been trying to deny. She had been pregnant. Throughout their marriage, she had been carrying his children, and he hadn't even suspected. Ryan tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't obey. He tried to call her name, but his voice wouldn't come out. He remained paralyzed, watching. The woman he had loved in silence care for the children he never knew existed. It was the oldest of the triplets who gave him away. The boy Maria was holding looked directly at Ryan and stretched his little arm out toward him, the way children do when they want to be held. Maria followed her son's gaze and froze completely. For 5 eternal seconds, they stared at each other across the airplane aisle. Maria was pale, her eyes wide with surprise and something that looked like fear. Ryan remained seated, incapable of any reaction other than breathing. Ryan. She said his name softly, almost a whisper, as if speaking any louder would break a dangerous spell. Maria. He managed to reply, his voice coming out hoarse and strange. The other passengers continued to board, talking, stowing their luggage, oblivious to the fact that 2 lives had just collided again in the narrow aisle of a commercial airplane. The baby in Maria's arms kept looking at Ryan with curiosity, and Ryan kept looking back, mesmerized by the discovery that this tiny face was a mirror of his own past. "You're—" Ryan tried to form a coherent question, but the words got jumbled. How could he ask about the children without it sounding like an accusation? How could he express his shock without seeming outraged? "Yes, I'm traveling to Miami," Maria answered quickly, as if trying to avoid the more obvious conversation. "For work. I got a job with an NGO that works on sustainable development in the region. The boys are... Ryan swallowed hard. Are they my sons? The question came out more directly than he intended, and Maria closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering the courage for an answer that would change everything. They are, she said, looking at him again. They're your sons, Ryan, our sons. Ryan Montgomery's world, built on solid foundations of control and predictability, completely crumbled on that rainy Thursday at 30,000 feet, somewhere between New York and Miami. The rest of the flight to Miami passed in an almost palpable tension. Maria had managed to switch seats with another passenger to be closer to Ryan, but their conversation was fragmented by the constant care the triplets required, Peter, Paul, and Michael, as she revealed their names during the trip. Ryan watched her every move with an intensity that bordered on desperation. The ease with which Maria changed diapers, prepared bottles, and soothed simultaneous tantrums from 3 18-month-olds was a universe completely unknown to him. "How do you do it?" Ryan asked, after Maria had just managed to get Peter, who had been crying for 15 straight minutes, to fall asleep. "Do what?" she replied softly, adjusting her son in the special seat. "All of this. Alone." There was genuine admiration in his voice, mixed with guilt. Maria took a moment to answer. "You learn when you don't have a choice." During the descent, as the pressure began to bother the babies, Michael started a desperate cry that echoed through the cabin. Maria tried to calm him, but the boy was inconsolable. Without thinking, Ryan held out his hands. "Can I?" he asked hesitantly. Maria hesitated for a second before handing Michael to him. The baby looked at Ryan in surprise, stopped crying instantly, and began to play with his Italian tie. Ryan felt something shift inside his chest, something warm and overwhelming that he couldn't identify. "He likes you," Maria observed, a deep sadness in her voice. "Of course he does, it's my genes." Ryan tried to sound casual, but his voice trembled slightly. When the plane touched down at Miami International Airport, Ryan was still holding Michael, who had fallen asleep in his arms. It was the first time in 2 years he had felt truly needed for something other than business. The baggage claim area was crowded, typical for a Thursday evening in Miami. Maria was managing the logistics of the children and luggage with military efficiency, but Ryan could see the exhaustion etched on her face. She was wearing the same simple clothes from the flight, carrying only 2 small suitcases and a diaper bag that seemed to contain half a children's pharmacy. "Where are you staying?" Ryan asked as they waited for their bags. "At a small inn in South Beach, near the NGO's office," Maria replied without looking at him, focused on stopping Paul from wandering toward the baggage carousel. "An inn? With 3 babies?" Ryan's surprise was obvious. "It's what the budget allows," Maria answered, with a coolness he recognized as a defense mechanism. Ryan was about to suggest she stay at the 5-star hotel, where he had a reservation, when Maria's cell phone rang. She answered immediately, and Ryan watched her expression change, from anticipation to confusion, then to something close to despair. "What do you mean, cancelled?" Maria spoke quietly, but Ryan caught every word. "No, I need to understand. I flew from New York. I have 3 children. Yes, I understand there were issues with the paperwork, but..." The call lasted 10 minutes. Maria tried to negotiate, to argue, to find a solution. Ryan watched the tense muscles in her neck, the way she bit her lower lip when she was nervous, intimate details he had never forgotten. When Maria hung up, she stood motionless for a few seconds, absorbing the impact of the news. "Problems?" Ryan asked, though the answer was obvious. "The job was cancelled," Maria replied in a controlled voice, but Ryan could hear it breaking underneath. "There were irregularities with the NGO's documentation. An IRS investigation. The project has been suspended indefinitely." Ryan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "And now?" "Now I have 3 children in a city I don't know, with no job, not enough money to fly back to New York before the end of the month, and an inn reservation I can no longer afford." Maria spoke with the same coolness, but her hands trembled slightly as she organized papers in her bag. Michael started to cry in Ryan's arms, a rising wail that quickly turned into a scream. Peter and Paul, as if synchronized, began to cry too. Maria tried to take Michael, but Ryan instinctively pulled back. "No," he said, surprising himself. "Let me." He tried to rock Michael the way he'd seen Maria do on the flight, but the baby only cried louder. Other people in the airport started to stare. Maria reached for him again. "Ryan, give him to me. You don't know how—" "Teach me," he interrupted, looking directly at her. "Teach me how to do it." There was something in his voice that Maria didn't recognize, a vulnerability, a need that went far beyond wounded pride or curiosity. Ryan Montgomery, the man who commanded boardrooms with a single glance, was asking for help to soothe a baby. Maria adjusted his arms, showed him how to support Michael's head, how to rock him gently. Talk to him, softly. They recognized their parents' voices. "What do I say?" Ryan whispered, feeling ridiculously lost. "Anything. That you're here. That everything's okay." Ryan began to whisper random words to Michael. He talked about the flight, about Miami, about how the boy's hair was just like his when he was a child. Gradually, Michael stopped crying and started to watch Ryan's face with curiosity. "He looks just like you when you're concentrating," Maria observed, a tenderness in her voice she was trying to hide. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question came out quietly, not as an accusation, but with a deep sadness. Maria took a long time to answer. "Because I knew you, Ryan. I knew your rules, your contracts, your need to control everything. If you had known about the babies, you would have turned motherhood into another contract clause. Supervised visitation, rigid schedules, their education planned out until they were adults. You would have offered me money, an apartment, security, everything except the one thing I needed." Which was love, Maria answered simply. "I needed you to actually love me, not just because I was the mother of your children." Ryan remained silent, absorbing her confession. Paul, in his stroller, started crying again, and Maria bent down to comfort him. "And now?" Ryan asked. "What are you going to do?" "I'll figure something out. I always do," Maria replied, but Ryan could see the real exhaustion behind her determination. "Stay with me." The words came out before Ryan could censor them. Maria looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean?" "Stay at the hotel with me, until you figure things out. I have a suite with 2 bedrooms, Ryan spoke quickly, as if he feared she would refuse before he could finish. "It's not charity, it's responsibility. They're my sons, too." Maria studied his face for a long moment. "And then what? When you go back to New York, what happens? Will you want scheduled visitations, child support with a non-disclosure agreement?" "I don't know," Ryan admitted with an honesty that surprised him. "I don't know anything, Maria. 2 hours ago I didn't even know they existed. Now I'm holding my son and trying to understand how you managed to raise 3 babies on your own for all this time. I don't know what I'll want, what I'll do, how any of this will work. I just know I can't leave you in some second-rate inn when I can offer something better." Maria hesitated. Ryan could see her weighing the pros and cons, calculating the risks, measuring her own strength. "It would be temporary," she said finally. "It would be temporary," Ryan agreed, though something inside him knew that none of this would be temporary. The Faena Hotel in Miami Beach was an imposing structure that dominated part of the South Beach skyline. When they arrived at the presidential suite, Maria stopped at the entrance, clearly intimidated. The place was larger than her entire apartment back in New York. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the ocean, with international designer furniture and original artwork on the walls. "Oh my God," she murmured, holding Peter and Paul, one in each arm. "You can take the room on the right. Do you have a crib for the kids?" Ryan asked, still carrying Michael. "They sleep with me, in one bed. We always sleep together," Maria replied, a defensiveness in her voice as if she expected judgment. Ryan called the front desk and requested 2 extra cribs, making no comment on their sleeping arrangements. While they waited, he watched Maria timidly explore the suite, turning gold-plated faucets on and off, testing the softness of the Italian sofa, gazing out the window at the illuminated beach. "It's beautiful here," she commented. "You've never been to Miami?" Ryan asked. "I'd never left New York until today. "This was the first vacation of my life," Maria answered, and Ryan felt a pang of guilt, remembering all the international trips he'd taken alone during their contract marriage. When the cribs arrived, Ryan tried to help Maria get the children ready for bed. It was a disaster. He didn't know how to change a diaper, couldn't understand why Paul refused the bottle that Michael accepted perfectly, and couldn't distinguish a cry of hunger from a cry of sleepiness. Maria did everything with a natural efficiency. That left him simultaneously in awe and feeling inadequate. "Do they always go to sleep this late?" Ryan asked when they finally managed to get all 3 babies into their cribs. "They're still adjusting to the time zone, and you got them all worked up." Maria smiled slightly, the first genuine smile Ryan had seen since their reunion. "I got them worked up?" "You're new to them, a male presence. They can feel your energy," Maria explained, tucking in the blankets. "My mother always said that babies are like antennas. They pick up on everything the adults are feeling." "And what are they picking up from me?" Maria looked at Ryan with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. Confusion, fear, guilt, and something I hoped I'd never see again. "What?" "Affection," Maria answered softly. "You look at them with affection, Ryan, and that makes them curious." They left the children's room in silence and settled in the living room. Ryan poured himself a whiskey and offered wine to Maria, who declined, explaining she was still breastfeeding. They sat in opposite armchairs, the dark ocean stretching out beyond the windows, the sound of the waves creating a melancholy soundtrack for a conversation. Neither of them knew how to begin. "Why did you choose Miami?" Ryan finally asked. "Because it was far from New York, far from you," Maria answered with brutal honesty. "After I found out I was pregnant, I needed distance, physical and emotional. My mother has family here, distant cousins who offered to help. You could have come to me. For what? To be told the pregnancy wasn't in the contract? To be treated like a problem that needed to be solved?" Maria spoke without anger, only weariness. "Ryan, you barely touched me during our marriage. You avoided any personal conversation. Do you really believe I would have come to you, pregnant, expecting emotional support?" Ryan had no answer for that, because she was right, completely right. "How was it? The pregnancy, the birth, everything?" he asked, a painful curiosity in his voice. Maria told him about the morning sickness that lasted all day, about working until her 8th month to save money, about the emergency premature delivery that left her hovering between life and death for 3 days. She told him about the first few weeks at home alone with 3 premature babies, about the nights she cried from exhaustion, about learning to be both a mother and a father. "My mother came from Yonkers to help me. She stayed for 6 months. She was the only thing that kept me sane." Maria paused, looking down at her hands. "Some nights, I'd look at them sleeping and think about how different it would be if you were there." "And how would it be?" "I don't know. Maybe you would have hired 3 nannies. Maybe you would have turned the house into a professional daycare. Maybe," Maria smiled sadly, "maybe you would have loved them the way I do." Ryan was silent for a few minutes, processing everything he had just heard. When he spoke again, his voice was different. "I'm sorry, Maria, for everything, for not knowing, for not being there, for being the kind of man who made you feel like you had to hide something so important." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "And I'm sorry I missed the first 18 months of my sons' lives." It was the first time Ryan had used the phrase, "my sons," with a sense of ownership. And the first time Maria saw tears in his eyes. The silence that followed was broken by the cry of one of the babies from the other room. Maria stood up automatically, but Ryan beat her to it. "I've got it," he said. "Teach me how to do it." That night, Ryan Montgomery learned that some contracts can't be negotiated, some responsibilities can't be delegated, and some loves can't be controlled. The first week in Miami was a crash course in fatherhood for Ryan. He had cancelled all his meetings related to the South Beach deal, citing urgent family matters, an excuse that drew skeptical laughter from Mark Sullivan, his junior partner, during a tense video conference. "Family matters, Ryan? You, the guy who always said family was a distraction for ambitious men?" Mark spoke from his Santa Monica penthouse, the camera deliberately framing the stunning beach view. "The investors are getting impatient. This Miami deal can't wait much longer." Ryan adjusted his laptop on the suite's kitchen counter, trying to muffle the sounds of Peter crying in the background as Maria prepared bottles. 2 weeks, Mark. I just need 2 more weeks to sort out some personal issues." "Personal?" Mark laughed again. "Ryan Montgomery sorting out personal issues? That's a new one. Don't tell me you finally discovered you have a heart." The irony of the comment wasn't lost on Ryan. Over the past 7 days, he had discovered emotional muscles he never knew he had. Waking up at 5 a.m. not to work out or review contracts, but to help Maria with a colicky baby. Learning to sterilize bottles, change diapers without looking like he was disarming a bomb, and distinguish the 3 different types of cries from each of the triplets. "Just give me 2 more weeks," Ryan repeated, ending the call before Mark could continue his interrogation. Maria appeared in the living room carrying Michael, who was clearly feverish. "He has a high temperature. I need to take him to a pediatrician." Ryan looked at his son. The word still sounded strange in his mind, and felt a completely new kind of anxiety. "Is it serious? Is a fever in a baby dangerous?" "It can be, especially at their age." Maria was already grabbing the diaper bag, organizing documents. "Can you stay with Peter and Paul? I'll be back soon." "No." Ryan stood up immediately. "I'm going with you." Maria paused, surprised. "You have meetings, the contract—" "To hell with the contract," Ryan replied, surprising himself with how easily the decision came. "Michael is my son. If he's sick, I'm going with him." Mount Sinai Medical Center in Miami was a chaotic mix of top-tier medicine and classic American bureaucracy. Ryan watched Maria navigate the system with efficiency. She knew exactly which documents to bring, how the pediatric emergency room worked, and even had a file on her phone with all the triplets' medical information organized by date. "You're good at this," Ryan commented as they waited in the waiting room, a feverish Michael asleep in his arms. "Good at what?" Maria murmured, clearly worried. "At being a mother, at knowing what to do." Ryan looked down at Michael, noticing how flushed his face was from the fever. "I would have had no idea that a fever in a child this young was a concern." "You learn," Maria replied, the same phrase she repeated constantly whenever Ryan asked how she knew everything about the children. "There's no manual, Ryan. You just learn by doing." When they were finally called, the pediatrician, Dr. Evans, a middle-aged man with a slight Miami accent, examined Michael carefully. Ryan watched every move, every expression on the doctor's face, trying to decipher any signs of seriousness. "Common virus," Dr. Evans announced after a few minutes. "Nothing to worry about. Fever reducer every 6 hours, lots of fluids, and keep an eye on him. If the fever doesn't break in 48 hours, bring him back." Ryan's relief was disproportionate. As they left the hospital, he realized he had been holding his breath for almost the entire consultation. "You were nervous," Maria observed in the taxi back to the hotel. "Of course I was nervous. My son is sick," Ryan replied, then paused, surprised by his own words. "Sorry, our son." Maria looked at him with an expression Ryan couldn't quite interpret, but there was something close to tenderness in her gaze. It was that afternoon, while Michael slept off his fever with the medicine, that Ryan's phone rang with a call that would change everything. It was Mark, but his voice was different, tense, urgent. "Ryan, we need to talk now." "I'm in Miami, Mark. You know that. I know you're in Miami playing daddy, but we have a serious problem here. The FBI just showed up at the office." Ryan's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, the FBI?" "Oh, money laundering investigation. Operation Cornerstone. They have search and seizure warrants, Ryan. They took computers, documents, and froze the company's accounts." Ryan immediately stepped out onto the balcony to talk without Maria overhearing. "Money laundering? We have nothing to do with money laundering." "Apparently we do." Mark's voice was heavy with sarcasm. "Remember that DC contract? The developments over the last 2 years in the district? It seems some of our investors weren't as clean as they appeared." Ryan vaguely remembered. Investors from DC who had injected capital into the company through shell corporations. Mark had handled the entire operation, assuring him it was all legal. that specialized lawyers had vetted the source of the funds. "Mark, you guaranteed me everything was clean." "And I thought it was, but it seems the feds have a different take on the situation." Mark paused. "Ryan, they want to question you too. You're the majority shareholder." "I'll be back in New York tomorrow. There's no point in coming back if we don't have a solid legal strategy." Mark lowered his voice. "Listen, I know some people. People who can help solve this problem discreetly." "What kind of help?" "The kind of help that makes FBI investigations get bogged down in technicalities. Problems with evidence, procedural issues, you know the drill." Mark paused meaningfully. "But it's going to be expensive, and it will require some concessions." Ryan immediately understood it was about corruption. Under-the-table payments, political influence, the shadowy world of power that had always existed in D.C., but that he had consciously avoided his entire career. "What kind of concessions?" "Nothing you need to worry about right now. Just give me a free hand to handle this, Ryan. Trust me like you always have." Ryan looked through the balcony window into the suite, where Maria was bathing Peter and Paul simultaneously in the marble tub, softly singing a children's song. Michael was asleep in his crib nearby, his fever finally under control. It was a scene of domesticity he had never imagined as part of his life. "I need to think, Mark." "We don't have time to think, Ryan. They're going to freeze all our assets. You're going to lose everything you've built. Your company, your reputation, your fortune, everything." Mark hung up, and Ryan remained on the balcony for a few minutes, watching the sunset over Biscayne Bay. For the first time in his adult life, he didn't know exactly what to do. There had always been a strategy, a plan, a rational way out of any business problem. But this was different. This was about character, about moral choices, about the kind of man he wanted to be for the sons he had just met. When he went back inside, Maria was drying Peter with a fluffy hotel towel. She looked at Ryan and immediately knew something was wrong. "Trouble at work?" she asked. Ryan hesitated. During their entire contract marriage, he had never shared professional problems with Maria. Business was a man's world in his mindset. But now, looking at the mother of his children, he felt a strange need to tell her the truth. "The company is under investigation by the FBI, suspected money laundering." Maria stopped drying Peter and looked directly at Ryan. "Did you launder money?" "No," Ryan answered immediately. "At least I never consciously did. But it seems some of our investors might have questionable origins. And now? Now I have to decide whether to accept help from people who can solve the problem through illegal means, or face the investigation cleanly and risk losing everything." Maria finished dressing Peter and placed him in his crib. Then she turned to Ryan with a serious expression. "Are you asking for my opinion?" "I am." Maria took a few seconds to respond. "During our marriage, you made every decision on your own. You never asked for my opinion on anything important. Now, in your first serious crisis, you want to know what I think." "I do." "I think you already know the right answer, Ryan. The question is whether you have the courage to do the right thing, even if it means losing everything you've built." That night, after the children had finally fallen asleep, Ryan and Maria talked late into the night on the suite's balcony. He told her about the pressure from Mark, about the solutions being offered, about the real fear of losing the empire he had spent 15 years building. Maria listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions that forced him to examine his own motivations. "Did you build your company honestly up until now?" Maria asked. "Yes. I always made a point of keeping everything clean." "Then why would you change now?" "Because now I have more to lose." Ryan looked at her. "I have you." "Ryan," Maria turned to face him completely, "do you think I would want my sons to grow up with a father who's a criminal? That I would accept a life built on dirty money? Would you prefer they grow up with a father who's honest, but poor?" Maria laughed, a low, melancholic sound. "Ryan, do you think I care if you're rich or poor? I grew up in the Bronx. My mother cleaned other people's houses to support me. Honest money has always been enough for me. And if I lose everything? The company, the properties, the offshore accounts? Then you start over," Maria answered simply. "At 40, with experience, contacts, knowledge, How many men would love to have that opportunity? Ryan remained silent, absorbing her words. The next morning, he called Mark and told him his decision. "We're going to face the investigation cleanly, hire the best criminal defense attorneys in the country, cooperate with the FBI, and prove our innocence through legal means." "You're insane, Ryan. This could take years, and there's no guarantee we'll come out of it clean." "So be it," Ryan replied. "I'd rather risk losing everything honestly than gain everything crookedly." "And what if we do lose everything?" Ryan looked at Michael sleeping in his crib, his fever finally gone, his little face peaceful, trusting completely in the adults around him. "Then at least my sons will grow up proud of the father they have." Mark hung up without saying goodbye, clearly frustrated with the decision. Ryan knew he would probably lose his partner too, on top of everything else. In the days that followed, while he waited for legal developments, Ryan immersed himself in fatherhood with an intensity that surprised Maria. He woke up for night feedings, learned to distinguish the triplets, different cries, and discovered that Paul liked classical music to fall asleep, while Peter preferred the sound of a hairdryer. Michael, still recovering from the virus, became particularly attached to Ryan. He always calmed down faster in his father's arms. "You're good at this," Maria commented one afternoon, watching Ryan bathe the three boys with growing skill. "I'm learning," Ryan replied, echoing her favorite phrase. "It's more than that." Maria came closer, helping rinse the soap from Peter's hair. "You have a father's instinct. That's something you can't be taught." Ryan felt something stir in his chest, pride perhaps, or just pure love for the three little beings who had revolutionized his understanding of himself. That night, while Maria slept exhaustedly in the next room, Ryan stayed awake in the living room, watching the three cribs through the partially open door. Peter, Paul, and Michael were sleeping soundly, their breaths synchronized, their little fists clenched like resting fighters. For the first time in 2 decades, Ryan Montgomery wasn't worried about financial spreadsheets, construction timelines, or market strategies. He was simply watching his sons sleep and discovering that it was the only thing in the world that truly mattered. 2 weeks after Mark's initial call, Ryan received an offer that would definitively test his character. It was a rainy Thursday in Miami, ironically similar to the one when it all began on the flight from New York, when Mark showed up at the hotel suite unannounced. Maria was on the living room floor playing with the triplets when the doorbell rang. Ryan opened the door to find his former partner dressed in an impeccable grey suit, wearing sunglasses even inside the hotel, and carrying an aluminum briefcase that immediately aroused suspicion. "Mark, what are you doing here? I came to save you from your own stubbornness." Mark walked into the suite uninvited, gave Maria a cold nod and completely ignored the children. "We need to talk, in private." Ryan glanced at Maria, who immediately understood the signal. "I'll take the boys to the bedroom." She gathered the 3 babies with efficiency, but Ryan didn't miss the look of concern on her face. Once they were alone, Mark opened the briefcase on the living room coffee table. Inside were documents, photographs, flash drives, and what looked like passports. "The situation in New York is worse than we thought," Mark began without preamble. "The FBI has expanded the investigation. Now they're looking at every contract from the last 5 years. They've found irregularities even I didn't know existed." "What kind of irregularities?" "Cash payments to get permits approved, over-invoicing on public contracts, using shell companies for tax evasion." Mark spoke as if reading a grocery list. "Ryan, they have enough evidence to put us away for the next 10 years. Ryan felt his stomach drop. "But we never knew," Mark interrupted him. "But the American justice system doesn't much care about our ignorance. They want someone to blame, and we own the company." Ryan looked at the documents spread across the table. There were photos of meetings he didn't remember attending, contracts he had signed but never read in full, and records of wire transfers to accounts he didn't recognize. "How could this have happened without my knowledge?" "Because you delegated, Ryan, remember? You always said you wanted to focus on the big picture while I handled the operational details." Mark smiled bitterly. "Well, the operational details included some creative accounting. You deceived me." Ryan's voice was low, controlled, but there was a cold fury underneath. "I protected you," Mark retorted immediately. "Do you think it's possible to build a real estate empire in this country and keep your hands completely clean? What country do you think you live in, Ryan? Everyone pays bribes, everyone evades taxes, everyone plays the game. The difference is, some of us are smart enough not to leave a trail." Ryan remained silent, processing the revelation that his company, his entire life's work, had been built on a corrupt foundation he never even knew existed. "And what's your solution?" Ryan finally asked. Mark smiled and pointed to the passports in the briefcase. "A strategic exit. These documents guarantee us a new life in Uruguay. Bank accounts already set up, companies already registered, permanent residency secured. In 6 months we'll be back in business, but on an international scale. And the US? The US gets left behind, along with the investigation, the charges, the prison sentences." Mark leaned back on the sofa. "Ryan, you're 40 years old. You have enough money in offshore accounts to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Why subject yourself to the American judicial system when you can start over free?" Ryan looked out the suite window, where rain was beginning to fall on South Beach. From the next room he could hear Maria softly humming to get the triplets to sleep, a song she had made up about cloud ponies and sand castles. "And Maria, the kids. They come with us, obviously. Uruguay is a civilized country, Ryan. First-rate education, excellent healthcare, a pleasant climate. Your sons would grow up bilingual with European passports, access to the best universities in the world." Mark spoke like an enthusiastic salesman. "It's an opportunity, not an escape. It's a crime, Mark. What's a crime is letting corrupt politicians destroy you while they walk free." Mark stood up, clearly impatient. "Ryan, you're being naive. In America, justice is a privilege for the rich. And we're rich. Why not use our advantage?" Ryan stood up too, walking to the window. The rain was now falling heavily, turning the beach into a blurry watercolor. He thought of Maria on the plane, handling 3 babies on her own. He thought of the way she organized bottles with military precision. He thought of the quiet pride with which she spoke of raising her sons without anyone's help. "She would never agree," Ryan said softly. "Of course she would. Any smart woman would choose a prosperous life abroad over honest poverty in the States." Ryan turned to face him. "You don't know Maria." "I know women, Ryan, and I know money. Money always wins." Mark checked his gold watch. "I have a private jet waiting at the airport. We can be in Montevideo before midnight." "No." The word came out with a firmness that surprised Ryan himself. Mark looked at him in disbelief. "What do you mean, no?" "I'm not running. I'm not going to live as a fugitive. And I'm not going to teach my sons that the solution to problems is to run away to another country. Ryan, you're letting sentimentality cloud your judgment. Think rationally. What's better, a comfortable life in Uruguay or a possible prison sentence in the US?" "An honest life in the US." Mark scoffed. "An honest life? Ryan, you don't even know what an honest life is. You were born rich, you grew up rich, you've always been rich. Do you think you can survive without the privileges that money buys?" "I'm about to find out." "And what if you find out you can't? What if you end up broke, unemployed, living in a rented apartment in the suburbs? Do you think Maria will still be by your side when reality hits?" The question hit Ryan like a punch to the gut, because it touched on his deepest fears. Maria had already left him once. What was to guarantee she wouldn't leave again if their circumstances changed? Just then the bedroom door opened and Maria appeared, holding Michael in her arms. The baby was clearly fussy, whimpering softly. "Sorry to interrupt," Maria said hesitantly. "Michael has colic, and he only settles down in his father's arms." Ryan looked at his son, his dark eyes identical to his own, his little fists clenched in discomfort, and felt something crystallize inside him. He took Michael into his arms, and the baby immediately stopped crying, snuggling against his chest. "Maria," Ryan said without taking his eyes off his son, "Mark is proposing that we flee the country, that we live in Uruguay to escape the investigation." Maria looked from Ryan to Mark, taking in the situation. "And you? What do you want to do?" "I want to stay. Face the consequences, prove my innocence, or accept whatever punishment I deserve. Ryan finally looked at her. But that could mean losing everything. The company, the money, the reputation. I could end up in prison. Maria was silent for a few seconds, watching Michael fall asleep in Ryan's arms. And you're asking me if I would stand by you through that? I am. Maria looked directly at him, and Ryan saw in her eyes the same determination that had drawn him to her from their very first day working together. Ryan, I raised 3 children on my own for a year and a half. I did freelance work to pay for diapers and medicine. I slept on the floor next to their cribs because I couldn't afford a bigger bed. Maria paused. Do you think I'm afraid of being poor? It's not about you being afraid. It's about you deserving better. I deserve an honest man, a father who is present for my children, a partner who chooses to do the right thing even when it's hard. Maria moved closer, gently touching Michael's cheek. The rest we'll build together. Mark watched the scene with a mixture of disbelief and impatience. This is all very touching, but you're both being naive. The system will crush you. American judges have no sympathy for rich businessmen. You'll come out to have this investigation destroyed. So be it, Ryan replied, still holding Michael. I'd rather be destroyed honestly than live prosperously as a criminal. And your sons? You're not thinking about their future. I'm thinking about the example I want to set for them. Ryan looked at Mark one last time. I want them to grow up knowing their father chose honesty, even when it came at a high price. Mark began to gather the documents from the briefcase, clearly frustrated. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Ryan. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. When Mark left, slamming the door behind him, Ryan and Maria remained in the living room in silence. Michael was sleeping soundly, completely oblivious to the fact that his family's future had just been decided. Are you sure? Maria asked softly. I'm sure I want to be the kind of man my sons can admire, Ryan answered. The rest I'll figure out as I go. Maria moved closer, standing beside him as they watched Michael sleep. And us? What happens to us? It was the question Ryan had been rehearsing for days, but it still terrified him. I don't know what will happen with the investigation, Maria. I could be acquitted or I could go to prison. I might keep something or I might lose everything. I have no guarantees to offer. I'm not asking for guarantees. Then what are you asking for? Maria took a few seconds to answer. I'm asking for honesty, about what you feel, about what you want, about who you really are when you take off all the corporate masks. Ryan took a deep breath, knowing he had arrived at the most vulnerable moment of his adult life. I love you. The words came out low, almost a whisper. I've loved you since the 2nd year of our contract marriage. I loved you when you cried in my arms over your mother. I loved you when we danced at Mark's wedding and you laughed at my terrible coordination. I loved you when you left me, and I love you now, holding our son. Maria closed her eyes as if absorbing every word. Why did you never say it? Because I was afraid of losing control, afraid of becoming dependent, afraid you would leave me if you knew how I felt. Ryan paused. And in the end you left. And me anyway. I left you because I thought you didn't love me, that I was just a convenience. Maria opened her eyes, and there were tears in them. If I had known, would you have stayed? I would have tried. I would have tried to teach you how to love without fear. Ryan felt Michael shift slightly in his arms, finding a more comfortable position. The baby sighed in his sleep, a small, contented sound that somehow encapsulated all the innocence Ryan wanted to protect. Maria, Ryan said, looking directly at her, I don't have a contract to offer this. Time. I don't have financial security, no timelines or guarantees. All I can offer is the truth. I want a real life with you. I want to be the father these boys deserve. I want to wake up with you every day and go to sleep, knowing we've built something real together. Even if it means a rented apartment instead of a penthouse, public school instead of an international one, Sunday BBQ instead of 5-star restaurants? Ryan smiled, the first genuinely happy smile he'd had in weeks. Especially if it means that. Maria moved closer, touching his face gently. Ryan Montgomery, asking for a second chance with no contract clauses. Ryan Montgomery begging for a second chance with no contract clauses, he corrected. Maria looked at Michael sleeping in his arms, then toward the bedroom door where Peter and Paul were also asleep, and finally back at Ryan. "I accept," she said simply. And as they kissed there in the living room of the suite, with the rain tapping against the windows and Michael sleeping between them, Ryan knew he had finally done the smartest thing of his life. He had chosen love over fear. The phone rang the next morning, with news that would change everything. But in that moment, with Maria in his arms and his 3 sons sleeping safely in the next room, Ryan Montgomery finally understood what it meant to be truly rich. The call came on a sunny Monday morning, 3 weeks after Ryan had chosen to face the investigation, instead of fleeing with Mark. Edward Carter Esquinas, the most respected criminal defense attorney in New York, whom Ryan had hired, spoke with an excitement unusual for a lawyer accustomed to bad news. "Ryan, you're going to want to sit down for this." Ryan was on the suite's balcony, watching Maria feed the triplets breakfast, an operation that had become his favorite morning entertainment. Peter was eating banana puree like a little angel. Paul was systematically rejecting anything green, and Michael was insisting on feeding his teddy bear instead of himself. "Go ahead, Ed. I'm prepared for anything." Mark was arrested last night at the airport in Montevideo. Ryan almost dropped his phone. "What?" He tried to leave the country on a fake passport. Interpol had issued a red notice as soon as we uncovered his involvement. When he was detained, he made a plea deal with the Department of Justice. Mr. Carter paused dramatically. "Ryan, he confessed to everything. He took full responsibility for the company's financial irregularities. He has documents proving you never knew about the corruption schemes." Ryan leaned against the balcony railing, his legs feeling weak. "He cleared my name." "Completely. More than that. He exposed an entire corruption network involving politicians, other businessmen, and IRS agents. You weren't just innocent, Ryan. You were one of the victims of the scheme." "What do you mean, a victim?" Mark had been embezzling money from the company for years, over-invoicing contracts, creating shell companies, using Montgomery Holdings as a front to launder money for third parties. According to preliminary calculations, you were defrauded of approximately $80 million. Ryan had to sit down. $80 million. Money he never even knew he had lost, stolen by someone he had trusted completely. And now, what happens to the company? The FBI is releasing all the frozen assets. The company will be back to business as usual. What's more, you'll likely receive a significant settlement for the damages you suffered. Mr. Carter chuckled softly. "Ryan, not only are you cleared of all charges, but you're going to come out of this richer than you went in." When Ryan hung up, he sat on the balcony for a few minutes, absorbing the magnitude of the turnaround. Through the window, he could see Maria trying to convince Paul to eat a carrot, while Peter smeared puree all over his high chair, and Michael continued his mission to feed the teddy bear. "Good news?" Maria asked when Ryan came back inside. Ryan told her everything: Mark's arrest, the confession, the discovery of the embezzlement, the unfreezing of the company. Maria listened in silence, occasionally intercepting Paul in his attempts to climb out of his high chair. "So you're free and rich again," she summarized when he finished. "I am," Ryan confirmed, but there was a hesitation in his voice that Maria immediately picked up on. "And does that change anything?" Ryan looked at her, hair in a messy bun, t-shirt stained with banana puree, barefoot, not a drop of makeup, and knew the answer was no. The woman in front of him was still the most beautiful and strongest person he had ever known, with or without money in the equation. "It changes that I can now offer real security for you and the boys. Private, school, premium health insurance, our own home, travel, college abroad if they want it." Ryan moved closer, helping to wipe Peter's face. "But it doesn't change a thing about how I feel about you. So what do you want to do now?" Ryan thought about the question as he watched his 3 sons finish their breakfast with varying degrees of success. Peter had managed to eat most of his puree. Paul had negotiated his way into eating only the sweet parts. Michael had split his meal evenly between himself and the teddy bear, which would now require an urgent wash. "I want to go back to New York, rebuild the company differently." with total transparency, independent audits, and social responsibility projects. Ryan paused. "And I want you to marry me." "Again?" Maria smiled. "Didn't we have enough trouble the first time?" "For real this time. No contract, no end date, no termination clauses." Ryan knelt on the suite floor, in front of Michael's high chair. "Maria Rodriguez, will you marry me for love, put up with stubborn children, share the same bed every night, and tolerate me when I try to create schedules for babies who clearly don't care about schedules?" Maria laughed. That laugh that could rearrange all the organized furniture in Ryan's soul. "I will, but on one condition." "What's that?" "No romantic honeymoon in Paris. I want a honeymoon on the Florida coast, with 3 kids who will cry on the plane and need their diapers changed every 2 hours. Ryan kissed her hand, sealing the most important deal of his life. 2 months later, they were back in New York. Ryan had bought a house in the West Village, not a mansion, but a real home with a backyard where the kids could play, a large kitchen where Maria could cook without being rushed, and an office where Ryan could work from home when needed. Maria had accepted a job at an NGO that developed housing projects for low-income families. Ironically, a job that sometimes positioned her as a consultant for Ryan's own company. She had insisted on maintaining her financial independence, even though Ryan could comfortably support the entire family. "It's not about the money," Maria explained when Ryan questioned why she wanted to keep working. "It's about being an example for the boys. I want them to grow up knowing their mother has her own identity, her own goals." Ryan had learned not to argue when Maria made decisions about the children's upbringing. She had an instinctive wisdom about motherhood that he completely respected. Montgomery Holdings was completely restructured. Ryan hired an independent management team, implemented rigorous auditing systems, and shifted the company's focus to affordable housing projects. The first development was a residential complex in the Bronx, an unspoken tribute to Maria's origins. "You're turning into a socialist," joked his new partner, a young architect from Columbia University who specialized in public housing. "I'm turning into a father," Ryan corrected. "And responsible fathers think about the kind of world they're leaving for their children." Mrs. Carmen, Maria's mother, moved to New York to help with the triplets. Ryan was initially nervous about having his mother-in-law around, a 60-year-old woman, a former housekeeper, who was not afraid to voice her opinion on any subject. "You've improved," Mrs. Carmen declared in their second week together, watching Ryan expertly change Michael's diaper. "When Maria was pregnant, I prayed every day that you'd become a decent human being. And now? Now I pray you stay one." She smiled. Rich men have a way of forgetting how to be human. Ryan grew to adore Mrs. Carmen. She treated her grandsons with the wisdom of someone who raised children with few resources, but a lot of love, taught Ryan family recipes, and occasionally put him in his place when he showed signs of wanting to overschedule their family life. The wedding was a small ceremony at their neighborhood church, with only close family and friends. Peter, Paul, and Michael served as ring bearers, dressed in miniature suits that lasted exactly 15 minutes before being stained with some combination of drool and orange juice. "Are you sure you want to do this again?" asked the priest, a young man who had known Maria since she was a child. "This time we're sure, Father," Maria replied, looking at Ryan. "The first time was a contract. This time, it's a choice." Ryan held Michael during the ceremony because the boy cried every time he was separated from his father. When it was time for the vows, Ryan had to speak with Michael drooling on his shoulder and trying to eat his tie. "Maria, I promise to love you every day, even when you insist that a banana is not a valid dessert for dinner. I promise to be present, to be honest, to be the father our sons deserve and the husband you deserve." Ryan paused to stop Michael from pulling off his buttons. "And I promise to never again sign documents without reading them, never again trust partners without investigating them, and never again pretend I don't have feelings when I'm actually terrified you'll leave me again." The priest laughed. "Those are the most honest vows I've ever heard." 3 years later, Ryan's promise was being tested in ways he had never imagined. It was a Sunday morning in December, the house filled with torn wrapping, paper, new toys scattered across the floor, and 3 4-year-old boys running through the living room dressed as superheroes. "Daddy!" Peter yelled, chasing Ryan through the kitchen with a makeshift cape made from a bedsheet. "You're the bad guy. You have to run away." Ryan ran in slow motion, making dramatic sounds of a defeated villain. Paul and Michael joined the chase, and within minutes, Ryan was on the living room floor, being arrested by 3 4-year-old superheroes who were laughing as if it were the funniest thing in the world. Maria watched the scene from the kitchen, where she was preparing Sunday lunch. She was visibly pregnant, 6 months along and glowing. The second pregnancy had been planned, wanted, and celebrated. A girl they would name Helen, after Ryan's paternal grandmother. "Are you happy?" Ryan asked later, when the children had finally fallen asleep after an exhausting afternoon of play. They were on the back porch, watching the quiet neighborhood settle down at the end of a Sunday. Maria was leaning against Ryan, her hand on her belly where Helen occasionally moved. "Silly question," Maria replied. "Of course I'm happy. Even with the house always a mess, with 3 boys who drive you crazy, with a husband who still occasionally tries to make schedules for spontaneous family activities." Maria laughed. "Especially because of all that." Ryan kissed the top of her head, breathing in the soft scent of her shampoo. "You know what I've discovered?" "What?" "That happiness has nothing to do with control. It has to do with giving yourself completely to the people you love, even knowing they might break your heart. And you're willing to take that risk?" Ryan looked through the porch window into the house, where 3 small cribs had been replaced by 3 toddler beds, where toys vied for space with children's books, where the walls were decorated with colorful drawings made by little hands instead of expensive works of art. "Every single day," Ryan answered. "Forever." Maria turned in his arms to face him. "Ryan?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For growing up. For learning that love isn't a contract you sign. It's a choice you make every day." Ryan kissed the woman who had completely transformed his life, from a man who controlled everything to a father who gave himself completely, knowing that this was exactly the kind of ending he had never imagined possible, but one he now couldn't imagine living without. The next morning, when he woke up to Peter, Paul, and Michael jumping on his bed at 6 a.m., demanding chocolate for breakfast and stories about friendly dragons, Ryan Montgomery smiled. He remembered the businessman he used to be, the one who woke up alone in silent apartments, who ate breakfast while reading the Wall Street Journal, who considered noise an unwelcome distraction. That man had been very powerful, very organized, very successful, but he had never been truly happy. And as Ryan prepared breakfast for 3 chattering boys and a pregnant wife, who appeared in the kitchen with messy hair and her pajama shirt on inside out, he knew he would never trade this loving chaos for the organized loneliness of his past. The empire he had rebuilt continued to grow. The company thrived with innovative social projects. His investments would provide financial security for his family for generations. But Ryan Montgomery's true wealth was sitting at the kitchen table that Monday morning, spilling orange juice on the tablecloth and laughing at jokes that only 4-year-olds find funny. And when Helen was born 3 months later, on a sunny morning in March, Ryan held his daughter in his arms for the first time and knew he had finally understood the difference between having everything and having what truly matters. The baby girl opened her dark eyes, identical to Maria's, and Ryan whispered to her the promise he had been making silently every day since he discovered he was a father. "I'll be here, always, for you." And for the first time in his life, Ryan Montgomery made a promise he knew he could keep.